By 1943, the Eastern Front had become the proving ground for every armored innovation of the Second World War. Thousands of tanks clashed daily across the vast plains of Ukraine, Belarus, and Western Russia. The German Wehrmacht and the Soviet Red Army fought not only with steel and firepower, but with doctrine, crew efficiency, and seconds of reaction time that often decided life or death inside a tank. The T-34, introduced in 1940, was the Soviet Union's armored revolution. Sloped armor, a powerful 76.2 millimeter gun, and excellent mobility. Against it, Germany fielded a series of increasingly advanced tanks, the Panzer IV, the Tiger I, and the Panther, each designed to restore battlefield superiority. Yet despite these technological advancements, the decisive factor in any engagement remained the human crew. 4 or 5 men working as one under unbearable pressure. Among these roles, the loader rarely received attention. To the public, tank duels were defined by commanders, gunners, and drivers. The loader, whose task was to feed the gun at a rhythm dictated by chaos, was often forgotten. Yet in real combat, the loader's speed determined whether a tank fired again before the enemy's next shot. On the Eastern Front, this difference could be fatal. A Soviet T-34 could fire approximately once every 10 to 12 seconds, depending on crew skill and ammunition storage. German tanks, particularly the Panther and Tiger, could reload faster, in as little as 6 seconds, but only under ideal conditions. Dust, exhaustion, or miscommunication could stretch that time to 10 seconds or more, negating their mechanical advantage. It was in this brutal context that one engagement, a brief, almost unbelievable episode, would become a small but revealing example of how precision, training, and human rhythm could change the outcome of battle. The account emerged from operational reports collected in 1944 by the German Army's Armored Forces Training Command. It described a single Panther tank during a Soviet counterattack near Kovel in what was then occupied Poland. The document did not name the crew, but recorded an extraordinary event. The Panther destroyed 3 advancing T-34/76 tanks in less than 1 minute. The commander credited the loader's timing, his ability to chamber rounds with mechanical precision under fire, as the decisive factor. Though easily dismissed as battlefield myth, the report aligns with multiple post-war interviews and technical analyses of Panther gunnery performance. When reconstructed through training data, ballistic characteristics, and crew coordination principles, the event becomes not legend, but a case study in how human efficiency amplified mechanical design. At the time, the German Panther OSF, mounted the KWK 42L/70, one of the most advanced tank guns of the war. Its high-velocity 75mm shells could penetrate 120mm of armor at 500 meters. The weapon's semi-automatic breech ejected spent casings automatically and reset for reloading without manual intervention, a feature that reduced loader fatigue and allowed an experienced crew to maintain an unprecedented rate of fire. But the Panther's advantage was not just its gun, it was the coordination between gunner and loader. Each movement was choreographed. The gunner called fertig, ready, the loader positioned the shell, the breech snapped shut, and the gun fired almost instantly. When executed flawlessly, this cycle could repeat every 6 seconds, fast enough to overwhelm an enemy formation before it could respond. The 1944 report cited the loader's synchronization with the recoil and automatic ejection system as superhumanly precise. He prepared the next round while the previous casing was still in motion, timing his movement with the rhythm of the gun itself. It was not luck, but the culmination of training, muscle memory, and deep understanding of the machine's behavior. To understand how such an event was even possible, one must look not at the heroism of individuals, but at the doctrine of German tank training. Efficiency at this level was the product of institutional obsession with coordination, repetition, and mechanical familiarity. Before any German tank crew entered combat, it underwent hundreds of simulated loading and firing drills. The Panzertruppenschule in Wunsdorf trained crews to operate the gun as a single organism. The loader's timing was practiced until it became instinctive, guided by auditory cues, the metallic clang of the breech, the recoil's rhythm, and the vibration through the floor plate. This was the environment that produced the loader whose timing would later be described as crazy. It was not madness, but mastery, a product of repetition refined to near mechanical perfection. As the Red Army prepared massive counteroffensives in the spring of 1944, German tank units like the Panzer Division, Wiking, and 5th SS Panzer Division, Waking, held defensive lines with dwindling resources. Each engagement tested not only machinery, but the human limits of speed, focus, and coordination. The battlefield where the incident occurred would become a textbook example for armored analysts after the war. 3 enemy tanks destroyed in under 60 seconds by one vehicle operating at the peak of technical and human performance. The story begins on a muddy field outside Kovel in March 1944, a place where seconds mattered more than anything else. The town of Kovel, in what was then the northern sector of occupied Poland, became one of the focal points of the Soviet Spring Offensive in 1944. Situated at a critical railway junction linking Brest-Litovsk and Lublin, it was vital for both logistics and morale. The Red Army's objective was to cut off the German 4th Panzer Army by seizing Kovel and surrounding the retreating units. By late March, the Soviet 2nd Tank Army had pushed westward with overwhelming force, deploying hundreds of T-34/76 and T-34/85 tanks. Opposing them were exhausted elements of the Panzer Division, Wiking, and 5th SS Panzer Division, supported by scattered Panther and Tiger detachments rushed from Germany to plug the gaps. The terrain was the worst possible environment for armored warfare, marshy, cold, and barely thawing from winter. Soviet tanks frequently bogged down in mud, while German vehicles risked mechanical breakdown from overstrained engines. Visibility was poor, communication lines fragmented, and both sides relied heavily on field initiative rather than coordinated maneuvers. According to post-war German archives, the event involving the rapid triple kill took place on March 27, 1944, during a Soviet counterattack against a German defensive line south of Kovel. Intelligence summaries describe a formation of approximately 40 T-34s advancing under artillery cover against German positions held by only 10 operational Panthers. The Panther platoon had been positioned in a shallow depression near a railway embankment, ideal for hull-down defense. From this position, the tanks could expose only their turrets while retaining clear fields of fire across the frozen plain. Each Panther carried a complement of 79 rounds, 40 armor-piercing PCQR, 39/42 shells, 25 high-explosive, and a few rare tungsten core PCQR 40 rounds reserved for emergency engagements. At approximately 8:45 hours, the Soviet advance began. The T-34s moved in staggered formation, using terrain folds for cover. German observers reported their approach at 1,200 meters, but due to poor radio coordination, individual tank commanders made independent decisions to open fire. The Panther from which the event originated, later identified as belonging to the 2nd Company, SS Panzer Regiment 5, was positioned slightly forward of the others, on firmer ground. When the first Soviet tanks appeared through the morning haze, the Panther's commander ordered fire at 800 meters. The gunner identified 3 targets, T-34s advancing abreast, spaced about 30 meters apart. Here the engagement shifted from routine to exceptional. The first shot struck the lead T-34 directly in the glacis plate, penetrating cleanly and detonating the ammunition. The tank erupted in a plume of black smoke and orange flame. Before the debris had even settled, the Panther's gun fired again. Just 6 seconds later, the second round hit the middle T-34 slightly to the right of the turret ring, a vulnerable spot. The shell's impact blew the turret partially off, killing the crew instantly. The third target, momentarily slowed by the wrecks ahead, attempted to turn away. The Panther's gun tracked and fired a third time, another 6-second interval. The round hit the engine deck, igniting the fuel tanks. 3 tanks destroyed in under 1 minute. The Panther's after-action report confirmed 3 kills at ranges between 700 and 850 meters, achieved with standard armor-piercing ammunition. The commander credited the loader's performance. Without delay, without hesitation, each round was ready before the gun was recentered. Analysis conducted post-war by Allied armor experts confirmed that such a rate of fire, one round every 6 to 7 seconds, was within the physical limit of a Panther crew operating at maximum efficiency. The semi-automatic breech allowed the loader to insert a new shell as soon as the spent casing ejected, but only if the loader anticipated the recoil sequence perfectly. In normal conditions, the loader waited for the breech to lock before reaching for the next round, losing critical seconds. In this engagement, the loader worked in complete synchronization with the gunner's rhythm. He retrieved, positioned, and rammed each shell just as the breech opened. One misstep could have caused a jam or injury, but none occurred. Witness reports from neighboring tanks describe the firing sequence as continuous thunder, a rare sustained rhythm from a single vehicle in combat conditions. Within 60 seconds, 3 Soviet tanks burned on the field, creating a smokescreen that concealed the German position from immediate retaliation. What made this moment remarkable was not only the speed, but the precision under pressure. Each shot required recalibration, range finding, minor elevation correction, and turret traverse, all synchronized with the loader's cycle. The gunner and loader had likely drilled this timing for months before the engagement. The technical miracle of firing 3 armor-piercing rounds within 60 seconds was not an accident. It was the result of deliberate engineering, a fusion of mechanical design and human synchronization. To understand how such precision was achievable, one must look inside the Panther's fighting compartment, where every centimeter and second were engineered for efficiency. The 7.5 centimeter Kug 42L/70 gun was among the most advanced tank weapons of the war. Weighing over a ton with its recoil mechanism, it was operated through a semi-automatic vertical sliding breech block. When fired, the gun recoiled approximately 400 millimeters. As it returned to battery, the breech automatically opened, ejecting the spent casing into a canvas catch bag or onto the turret floor. The mechanism then reset itself, ready for the next round. This feature meant that the loader's timing determined the true rate of fire. A skilled loader could anticipate the recoil, position the next shell before the breech finished cycling, and insert it the moment the ejection completed. On paper, this system could sustain 8 to 10 rounds per minute, but only if the crew worked with flawless rhythm. In most battlefield conditions, a Panther fired 4 to 6 rounds per minute. Mud, exhaustion, or cramped ammunition layout slowed the loader's movements. Shells weighed nearly 7 kilograms each and were stored in racks beneath the gun, along the turret walls, and in bins on the hull floor. Reaching them required physical strength and coordination. The loader's motion was a precise choreography. Left hand to shell rack, right hand guiding the round, both arms extending to align with the breech, body braced to absorb recoil vibration. Inside the Panther, space was at a premium. The gun breech occupied most of the central turret, leaving only a narrow gap between it and the loader's ammunition stowage. Every action had to be executed without wasted motion. During training, loaders performed repetitive dry loading drills, hundreds per day, until each motion was instinctive. The Army's armored schools emphasized rhythm over raw speed, teaching crews that consistency was the path to precision. German gunnery manuals detailed the ideal sequence in milliseconds: recoil and ejection cycle, 0.6 seconds, loader grasping the next shell, 1.5 seconds alignment and ramming, 2.4 seconds, breech closure and ready call, 0.5 seconds firing. Instantaneous, executed perfectly, this produced a total cycle of just over 5 seconds per shot. In practice, few crews could maintain it under combat stress. The loader in the Koval engagement had achieved this level of synchronization not by instinct alone, but by aligning his movements with the mechanical rhythm of the gun, using the recoil's vibration through the turret floor as his cue. The Panther's turret layout aided this efficiency. Unlike earlier German tanks, its ammunition bins were arranged radially, allowing the loader to pivot rather than reach down awkwardly. The design was informed by combat feedback from Kursk in 1943, where slow reload times had proven fatal against massed Soviet armor. By 1944, Panther production models featured improved storage racks that reduced the time to retrieve each round by nearly 1 second. The breech operation system was another critical factor. The KWK-42 used a recoil-operated breech mechanism that required minimal manual handling. After firing, the breech opened automatically, and a small spring mechanism absorbed the spent casing's momentum, directing it into the catcher. The loader's role was reduced to a single continuous motion: grab, insert, push, repeated with machine-like precision. The coordination between loader and gunner also depended on communication cues. German doctrine prohibited unnecessary shouting inside the tank. Instead, the gunner gave a verbal cue only when the target was aligned. A clipped fertig, ready. The loader, hearing the cue and the sound of the recoil, could predict exactly when to insert the next round. The commander, meanwhile, observed and issued target updates without interfering with the firing rhythm. The synergy among the three men created a self-sustaining tempo, a mechanical human loop. Every firing cycle reinforced the next. When functioning perfectly, it transformed the tank into a living weapon system, faster than any of its components individually. Post-war British mechanical studies at Aldershot Proving Ground confirmed that German loaders were capable of sustaining 6-second firing intervals for short bursts, particularly when the ammunition was pre-selected and ready in the turret racks. The limiting factor was fatigue. After 10 to 15 rounds, the loader's physical endurance declined sharply and the cycle time doubled. When the smoke cleared over the Koval field, the wrecks of 3 burning T-34s stood in the stark contrast against the snow-melted mud. The rest of the Soviet formation hesitated. Within armored warfare doctrine, hesitation was death. Momentum was survival. For a brief moment, that rhythm broke. The Panther platoon commander used those seconds. He ordered a 30-meter reposition, moving the tanks along the embankment to alter their firing angles. Soviet tank commanders, uncertain of the source of fire, spread out and attempted a flanking maneuver. Yet the terrain offered little room for movement. Soft ground and shell craters turned every change of direction into a risk of immobilization. Radio intercepts later confirmed that the Soviet company commander believed he was facing at least a full German battalion. In reality, only 5 Panthers held the line. Their advantage came not from numbers, but from precision and timing. The loader's speed had bought time. The Panther crew used the lull to replace spent shell casings, check the breech for residue, and reposition ammunition. Within 90 seconds, they were ready again. Across the plain, Soviet gunners finally opened fire. Their 76.2 millimeter shells scattering against the embankment and ricocheting from the Panther's sloped armor. At 900 meters, the German gunners returned fire. The loader resumed his mechanical rhythm. Every cycle now took 8 seconds, slightly slower, but still faster than the Soviet crews could match. 2 more T-34s were disabled within the next minute. One hit in the turret ring, another in the side hull as it attempted to turn. Soviet infantry accompanying the tanks dismounted and sought cover in shallow ditches, but German machine gun fire from nearby positions forced them back. The Red Army tankers regrouped behind smoke shells, forming a defensive semicircle around their remaining vehicles. What had begun as an offensive now became a desperate firefight for survival. This pattern of sudden counterfire was consistent with German defensive doctrine developed after 1943. The Panther was designed for such engagements, to absorb the initial blow, then respond with concentrated, rapid precision. The German high-velocity guns outranged most Soviet tanks by hundreds of meters. But without efficient reloading, that advantage vanished. The loader's discipline sustained that range advantage minute after minute. Ammunition expenditure reports from the day listed 14 armor-piercing rounds fired, 7 confirmed hits. This ratio, 1 hit for every 2 shots, was considered exceptional accuracy under combat stress. It suggested that the gunner and loader were working in complete synchronization, compensating for recoil, dust, and target movement with minimal delay. From the Soviet perspective, the engagement was baffling. Surviving crew reports, captured months later, described continuous firing from one position at impossible speed. Some tankers believed they were under attack by multiple self-propelled guns. Others thought German artillery had been pre-sighted on the field. The idea that a single tank could maintain that tempo seemed implausible. When the battle report reached the headquarters of the 5th SS Panzer Division, it was logged as an example of crew discipline rather than heroism. German doctrine discouraged glorification of individuals. Efficiency was treated as a technical parameter. not personal valor. But within armored schools, the event was quietly discussed as proof of concept. Trained crews could achieve theoretical maximum rates of fire in actual combat. The incident also revealed the limits of Soviet tactics at that stage of the war. The Red Army's strength lay in coordination and mass, not in small unit finesse. Tank platoons advanced in tight formations designed to overwhelm through volume. Against an enemy firing twice as fast, that density became a liability. The concentrated pattern presented multiple targets within one gun traverse arc, a rare gift to any experienced gunner. As dusk fell over the Koval sector, the field was littered with burning Soviet machines. The surviving Panthers withdrew 300 meters to a secondary position before nightfall. In total, 9 T-34s were destroyed or disabled that day. The German defensive line held until reinforcements arrived the following morning. Operationally, the engagement was minor, one of thousands along the front, but tactically it demonstrated something critical. Combat efficiency was not solely a function of technology or numbers. It depended on the smallest variable of all: seconds. The loader's 6-second rhythm had not merely improved fire rate, it had reshaped the tempo of the entire skirmish. Behind the performance of that Panther at Koval was a doctrine born years earlier, a methodical system of training that treated tank warfare as both science and craft. The German Panzertruppen did not simply train crews to shoot. They trained them to operate as components of a synchronized machine. The loader, though often the youngest and least glorified member of the crew, embodied that philosophy most of all. The foundation of this doctrine lay in the Panzertruppenschule 1 in Wunstorf and its satellite facilities across Germany and occupied France. Beginning in 1941, instructors there refined a system of drills that broke down every task inside the turret into measurable sequences. The aim was not speed for its own sake, but predictability under stress. Every action, sight adjustment, loading, breech closure, was to occur with identical timing, regardless of circumstances. The German army recognized early that the loader's efficiency directly determined the tank's lethality. Records from training manuals such as D656/22, Merkblatt für den Panzerkampfwagen FAM, 1943, detailed not only gunnery and mechanical maintenance, but the physical conditioning of loaders. Exercises included repeated ammunition handling with weights identical to live rounds, blindfolded reloads, and full turret drills performed in blackout conditions to simulate night fighting. A Panther loader trained to perform 400 reload motions per day during instruction, each measured by stopwatch. The goal was to achieve a repeatable cycle of 6 to 7 seconds under simulated battle stress. If a recruit failed to maintain rhythm under fatigue, he was reassigned to secondary duties. This strict filtering ensured that only the most disciplined and physically resilient soldiers served in frontline Panther crews. The psychological component was equally important. German tank training emphasized Vertrauen im Mechanismus, trust in the mechanism. Crews were expected to know their machines intimately, to feel when a bearing was straining or when a hydraulic line vibrated abnormally. The loader's ears became part of the firing system. He listened for the breech's tone, the click of the safety latch, the whine of the recoil spring. The best loaders could identify a misfeed by sound alone before it occurred. Instructors frequently repeated a maxim: Der Panzer ist keine Waffe, ist eine Mannschaft in Stahl. The tank is not a weapon, it is a crew in steel. That idea guided every stage of their preparation. When a crew entered combat, its coordination had already been conditioned to a near-muscular reflex. The loader's timing was not individual brilliance. It was the logical outcome of a system that quantified discipline. This training was backed by mechanical precision. German engineers designed every Panther gun with manufacturing tolerances tighter than 0.02 millimeters at the breech block interface. The smooth cycling of the KWK 42L/70 allowed for consistent recoil rhythm, which the loader could synchronize to instinctively. In this way, mechanical design and human reaction became inseparable components of performance. By contrast, Soviet tank training of the same period emphasized simplicity and speed of replacement. Crews learned basic operation in weeks rather than months. Soviet loaders were trained to fire at maximum rate regardless of precision. Their tanks relied on numerical superiority rather than coordination efficiency. As a result, the T-34's average sustained rate of fire was lower and its accuracy poorer, a difference magnified in one-on-one duels. German reports from the Panzertruppenschule Bergen in 1944 detailed controlled experiments comparing firing rhythms between newly trained and veteran crews. The best crews achieved consistent reload cycles of 6.2 seconds across multiple targets at ranges of 500 to 1,200 meters. Under the same conditions, Soviet-captured T-34 crews demonstrated 9 to 11-second intervals with reduced accuracy. The difference of 3 seconds per shot, multiplied across multiple engagements, could decide which crew survived. This doctrine was so deeply ingrained that even as the war turned against Germany, training never abandoned its obsession with rhythm. Manuals from late 1944 still instructed, the loader must prepare the next round before the recoil ends. Hesitation kills. Even in collapsing supply conditions, crews drilled empty casings to preserve tempo. The loader's workspace itself reflected this discipline. Inside a Panther turret, every rack, latch, and holder was positioned according to ergonomic logic. Ammunition racks near the turret wall were staggered so the loader could pivot his torso rather than bend or reach. During combat, rounds were pre-selected and placed in a rotation pattern. High explosive on the left, armor-piercing on the right, tungsten core rounds within immediate reach. By 1944, the German Army's armored warfare doctrine had evolved into something far more sophisticated than most Allied analysts realized. Its strength no longer rested solely on superior equipment, but on the micro-level execution of time, the mastery of seconds inside a tank turret. The Panther's crew efficiency became the embodiment of that doctrine. Every motion was calculated, every second measured against survival. The Cavell engagement exemplified this philosophy in practice. German reports after the battle emphasized not the destruction of 3 T-34s, but the tempo of the action, a concept known in Wehrmacht terminology as Feuerfolgegeschwindigkeit, or successive fire velocity. Commanders used the term to describe the rate at which a crew could identify, engage, and neutralize multiple targets without losing rhythm. It was both a mechanical and psychological weapon. In tank warfare, breaking the enemy's firing rhythm meant breaking their initiative. If one side could fire twice before the other returned a single shot, the battle's outcome was almost predetermined. This understanding shaped German tactical training from the mid-war years onward. Every Panther, Tiger, and late Panzer IV crew was taught to think not in shots fired per minute, but in cycles per engagement, sequences of fire and move actions calibrated to time, terrain, and communication speed. The loader's role in this doctrine was fundamental. His cycle, from ejection to chambering the next round, dictated how long the tank remained exposed between shots. Each delay expanded vulnerability. German tactical analysts calculated that every additional second between rounds increased the likelihood of being hit by 12% when under direct enemy observation. That figure turned speed from a mechanical advantage into a matter of crew survival. The 6.3-second average reload achieved by elite Panther crews, documented in Heereswaffenamt trials, provided a measurable edge. At 800 meters, a T-34's 76mm gun required around 10 seconds to fire, correct, and reload. The difference of 3.5 seconds per shot allowed a Panther to fire almost twice before the Soviet crew's next round left the barrel. In a duel between two vehicles of roughly equal protection, that timing difference was decisive. The Germans institutionalized these findings in training memoranda circulated through the Panzertruppen schools in early 1944. One passage read, "Every tank fight is a race of sequences. The victor is he who completes his firing cycle first and with consistency. The loader's rhythm determines victory." This statement was not theoretical. German armored units recorded engagement data in real time. The most experienced crews were measured during exercises using mechanical chronometers mounted in turrets. Those readings produced hard data correlating reload speed with kill probability. The loader's seconds could be graphed, analyzed, and compared like ballistic performance. Within that framework, the crazy timing of the Koval loader ceased to be anecdotal. It was an extreme instance of an already measured science. The loader had reached the physical limit of human synchronization with machinery. the ideal envisioned by the armored schools but rarely realized in the chaos of battle. While the Wehrmacht perfected this micro-tactical rhythm, the Soviets approached timing differently. Their doctrine emphasized massed fire rather than individual precision. Soviet tank platoons were expected to saturate a target area with shells, compensating for slower reloads through numerical volume. The result was a higher probability of hits over time, but less efficiency per tank. The Panthers' training doctrine exploited that gap. German gunnery officers taught that precision timing could neutralize numerical inferiority if applied correctly. By sustaining rapid, accurate fire for even 30 seconds, a smaller unit could break up a larger formation by causing disarray and psychological hesitation. Exactly what had occurred at Kovel. In March 1944, reports from the 5th SS Panzer Division, Wiking, emphasized that the Panthers' success in defense was not only due to its armor or gun, but to exceptional crew cycle discipline. Those words, buried in dry operational summaries, revealed a subtle truth. Timing had become a weapon in itself. The concept even reached higher command levels. Training manuals issued later that year incorporated new charts listing firing cycle intervals as tactical benchmarks. Commanders were instructed to assess their crews not merely on marksmanship, but on tempo consistency across simulated engagements. The German army was quantifying human performance in the same statistical manner it had once measured muzzle velocity or armor thickness. Behind the loader's remarkable timing stood not only training, but a series of subtle engineering refinements that defined late-war German tank design philosophy. By 1943, engineers at the Maschinenfabrik Augsburg-Nürnberg, MAN, and Daimler-Benz design offices recognized that the Panther's mechanical superiority could only be fully exploited if its internal ergonomics allowed crews to perform at their physical limits. Reload speed was not merely a function of human skill, it was the intersection of mechanical layout, shell handling design, and turret rotation efficiency. In the earliest Panther Ausführung D models, crews complained that shell access was slow and inefficient. Ammunition was stored in awkward racks on the floor and sidewalls, forcing loaders to twist their bodies while handling 6.8 kilogram, 75 millimeter rounds. The average reload time under combat simulation was 8 to 9 seconds, slower than projected. Field reports from the Eastern Front, especially those from the 1st Panzer Regiment in early 1943, specifically noted that the positioning of shell racks restricts efficient loading and contributes to crew exhaustion during sustained firing. The Heereswaffenamt's design engineers responded with a sequence of ergonomic changes. The floor-mounted racks were reoriented at a 45-degree angle, allowing the loader to retrieve shells with minimal upper body rotation. This seemingly minor adjustment reduced the average loading motion from 210 degrees of torso movement to approximately 140. Over the course of a 3-minute engagement, this saved an estimated 1.2 seconds per round, an immense gain when life and death depended on milliseconds. Another overlooked innovation was the turret traverse gear ratio modification introduced in the LUSF. A model. Engineers rebalanced the power distribution between the hydraulic and manual traverse systems, reducing the required crank resistance by 11%. This allowed the gunner to maintain smoother alignment with moving targets, decreasing the micro-adjustment time between shots. As a result, the loader could anticipate barrel position more predictably, preparing shells without waiting for final gun alignment. The combined mechanical and ergonomic refinements created what engineers described as a closed performance loop. The smoother the turret alignment, the faster the loader could anticipate the breech position, and the more accurate the gunner could fire in rhythm. Timing was no longer a sequence of discrete actions. It became continuous motion. In addition to physical design, mechanical engineers focused heavily on the breech mechanism of the T-42L70. This 75mm gun had one of the fastest semi-automatic breech operations of the war. After firing, the breech block automatically ejected the spent casing with a mechanical impulse of 20 kilograms of force, flinging the shell into a catcher tray and resetting the chamber for the next round within 0.7 seconds. Compared to the manual ejection systems of the T-34's 76mm gun, which required roughly 2 seconds of manual extraction, This mechanical advantage allowed German loaders to operate at nearly double the efficiency. Engineers tested these features under controlled conditions at Kummersdorf. Reports dated December 1943 recorded that elite Panther crews achieved sustained firing rates of 10 rounds per minute at stationary targets, with minimal drop in accuracy due to fatigue. Even under simulated stress, vibration, restricted space, and limited visibility, trained loaders maintained an 8-second cycle. For comparison, U.S. Army Ordnance tests of captured Panthers at Aberdeen Proving Ground in 1944 found that average American crews required 11 to 12 seconds per round when operating the same gun without prior training. This gap in human-machine familiarity underscored the synergy between engineering design and crew specialization. German loaders were not just fast, they were conditioned through repetitive drills that mirrored the precise mechanics of the Panther systems. By late 1944, engineers had formalized the relationship between ergonomics and combat performance. New crew training diagrams issued to replacement units included mechanical timing sequences synchronized with hand signals. A loader would begin motion on the ejection sound rather than on the commander's command, effectively removing verbal delay from the cycle. This refinement alone shaved 0.3 seconds from each reload on average. The Panther had become, through these cumulative design choices, an instrument built around human timing. Each improvement was incremental, a lever angle here, a rack tilt there, but together they produced an unmatched operational cadence. By the spring of 1944, the theoretical advantages of the Panther's gun handling system met their most brutal test in the vast, chaotic battles of the Eastern Front. The once finely coordinated German armored doctrine, which relied on trained crews and carefully timed fire discipline, was being tested under conditions of exhaustion, retreat, and overwhelming Soviet pressure. Yet it was here, amid the wreckage and attrition, that the synergy between human reflexes and mechanical precision reached its peak. Field reports from Panzer Regiment 26, operating near Vitebsk in early 1944, documented several cases of Panther tanks engaging superior numbers of T-34s at ranges under 800 meters. Soviet tactics had evolved. Instead of broad frontal assaults, they now used dispersed formations and rapid flanking. The T-34/76 advantage in maneuverability at close range forced German crews to operate their vehicles to the limits of endurance. In one after-action report, a commander noted, "The loader's rhythm decides survival. A slow reload is death." At the heart of these encounters was the KWK-42L/70, a weapon that combined high muzzle velocity, approximately 935 meters per second, with exceptional penetration and flat trajectory. Its ballistic properties gave the gunner a narrow window of firing precision. Any delay between shots allowed Soviet tanks to close distance and exploit their numerical advantage. It was in this context that loaders, often the youngest members of the crew, became the most critical variable. German Army technical reports from April 1944 include detailed reload time measurements under combat conditions. In tests conducted with experienced crews, the Panther achieved average shot intervals of 7.5 seconds when stationary and 9.3 seconds while firing on the move. These figures reflected not only human efficiency, but also the reliability of the semi-automatic breech and the arrangement of shell racks. In contrast, Soviet evaluations of captured Panthers noted that untrained crews could not reproduce these results, often taking 12 to 14 seconds between shots due to unfamiliarity with the weapon sequence. A critical mechanical factor in the Panther's combat rhythm was the turret rotation speed, powered by a hydraulic motor linked to the main engine. At 2,500 RPM, the Traverse system could rotate the turret 360 degrees in approximately 18 seconds, faster than most Allied tanks of the time. This speed allowed gunners to transition quickly between targets, while loaders synchronized their motion to the turret's swing. German instructors emphasized this harmony in training manuals. The loader must move as the gun moves. The weapon is one organism, and he is its heartbeat. Combat footage recovered from German reconnaissance cameras showed Panthers engaging multiple targets in sequence, the turret swinging smoothly as each shell was loaded, fired, and ejected. The loader's timing had to be near perfect. Any misalignment could result in jamming or casing obstruction. The KBWK-42's breech was precise but intolerant of mistiming. If the next round entered the chamber before the recoil cycle fully reset, the shell could jam against the breech block, disabling the weapon temporarily. In battle, such a mistake was often fatal. The tactical manuals issued by the Panzertruppenschule Bergen addressed this explicitly. They prescribed a 3-beat rhythm for rapid-fire engagements. Eject. As soon as the recoil stops, the loader clears the casing. Insert. The new shell enters with a single fluid motion from the ready rack. Reset. Loader braces as the gun fires, keeping hands clear of recoil parts. Executed correctly, this sequence could sustain continuous fire at rates of 8 rounds per minute, almost double that of Allied tanks with comparable calibers. Eyewitness accounts from Soviet tankers reveal how terrifying this rhythm appeared in battle. Survivors from the 2nd Guards Tank Corps, engaged at the Battle of Narva in summer 1944, described how German Panthers could fire again before the shell impact smoke cleared. Their reports exaggerated the timing, but the psychological effect was real. The synchronized operation of the Panther's loader and gunner created an illusion of mechanical relentlessness, a machine that never seemed to pause. On the German side, however, maintaining that precision exacted a severe physical toll. Loaders in combat often worked under extreme heat and constant vibration, handling shells that weighed over 15 pounds while being thrown violently by turret motion. Veterans later recalled that their arms bruised and their palms bled after prolonged engagements. The efficiency the engineers had built into the machine depended on human endurance that few could sustain for long. By late 1944, as the war turned decisively against Germany, the precision that once made its armored forces dominant had become both its greatest strength and its fatal vulnerability. The Panther's design demanded discipline, synchronization, and endurance from its crews, traits that were eroding as veteran tankers were lost and replaced with hastily trained recruits. Still, the underlying mechanics of the tank and the physics of its firing cycle remained superior. What the loader achieved inside that narrow steel turret was not luck or bravado. It was the product of engineering logic pushed to its limit. Every second in a tank duel was a measure of probability, between life and death, hit and miss. The ballistic superiority of the 7.5-centimeter KWK-42L70 gave the Panther the ability to destroy a T-34 frontally from over 1,500 meters. Yet at typical Eastern Front engagement distances, often between 600 and 900 meters, the difference came down to timing. The first tank to fire accurately usually survived. The loader's efficiency determined how many opportunities that gunner had before the enemy closed the range. In post-war assessments, Allied analysts at the U.S. Army's Aberdeen Proving Ground measured the Panther's mechanical loading cycle under ideal conditions. They found that, excluding human delay, the gun's semi-automatic mechanism could theoretically sustain one shot every 5.3 seconds. The only true limit was the loader's ability to move and the crew's coordination. American test crews trained on M4 Shermans averaged 9 to 10 seconds per shot using the same gun. The difference, less than 4 seconds, equated to 2 extra shells in a 20-second exchange. In tank warfare, that advantage was overwhelming. The physical movement pattern of the German loader was optimized through repetition and experience. Positioned on the right side of the gun, he used a half-step rotation of the torso and a shoulder pivot to lift the shell from the rack, push it into the breech, and return to brace before recoil. His left hand guided the round, while the right hand applied the thrust, all in one motion. The Panther's interior layout, with staggered ammunition racks and an open path to the breech, minimized wasted reach. The T-34, by contrast, forced its loader to bend awkwardly to the floor to retrieve rounds, resulting in slower reload cycles and higher fatigue. The rhythm of the loader's timing was more than physical. It was psychological synchronization with the entire crew. When firing at multiple targets, the commander would call bearings and distances while the gunner maintained alignment. The loader, listening to the cadence of the gun's recoil, began movement before orders were complete. This preemptive motion, guided by sound and habit rather than command, saved crucial fractions of a second. It was the essence of German crew coordination, refined through doctrine and endless drills. A remarkable example of this system's precision appears in a post-action report from Panzer Regiment II, operating near Lake Balaton in March 1945. A single Panther, under fire from a formation of T-34s/85s, achieved 5 confirmed kills in less than 90 seconds. Investigators later analyzed the engagement and noted that the average reload interval between shots was 7.2 seconds, despite the tank being stationary under heavy return fire. Each shot corresponded precisely with the engine's RPM rise, suggesting the loader timed his movement with the recoil cycle of both the gun and the turret traverse motor. German engineers had unknowingly built a system where mechanical rhythm dictated human rhythm. The gun's recoil, the hiss of the hydraulic traverse, the engine revving, all became auditory cues. For elite crews, these sounds formed a metronome of survival. The loader's crazy timing, as later observers described it, was not erratic or frantic. It was mathematically precise. Every shell that entered the breach was part of a continuous cycle optimized through both human instinct and engineering foresight. This synchronization between man and machine was not easily replicated by the Allies or the Soviets. American crews relied more on standardized communication and less on instinctive timing. Soviet doctrine emphasized numerical strength and mobility over fine mechanical performance. The Panther's reload cycle represented a uniquely German obsession to engineer efficiency until it mirrored instinct. But this perfection came at a cost. The same precision that allowed lightning-fast reloads also made the Panther fragile under poor maintenance. Its hydraulic systems required clean oil and pressure calibration. The ammunition racks demanded alignment checks after each major recoil shock. Under retreat conditions, mud, cold, and supply collapse, these requirements became impossible to maintain. A jammed breech or hydraulic leak could render the gun inoperable, and by late 1944, such failures were common. When the war ended in 1945, the wrecks of Panther tanks littered Europe from Normandy to the Vistula. Most were burned out, abandoned from fuel starvation or mechanical breakdowns rather than enemy fire. Yet among the armies that studied them, American, British, and Soviet, there was universal recognition that these machines represented an extraordinary fusion of human-centered design and mechanical discipline. The crazy timing of the German loader that had once seemed like luck or desperation was, in truth, the final product of a system built on precision. At Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland, engineers meticulously dismantled several captured Panthers through late 1945 and early 1946. Their reports focused heavily on the gun's operating cycle and crew efficiency. They found that, despite its complexity, the KWK-42L/70 was one of the most perfectly balanced tank guns of the war, a weapon whose internal mechanisms worked in concert with human reflexes. The semi-automatic breech, the short throw of the recoil, and the smooth hydraulic assist all created an ergonomic environment optimized for speed. Aberdeen's engineers concluded the limiting factor of the Panther's rate of fire was not its machinery, but the endurance of the man operating it. That single observation captured the heart of what made the Panther unique. It was not simply a tank designed to fight, it was a machine designed around human rhythm. The loader's motion was an engineered component, just as essential as any gear or bearing. The best crews understood that their own muscle memory was part of the weapon system's efficiency, and when that synchronization was perfect, the results could seem superhuman. British analysts at the School of Tank Technology in Chertsey drew similar conclusions. Comparing the Panther to their own Cromwell and early Centurion designs, they found that the German tank's interior layout, though cramped, was ergonomically superior in the way it facilitated the loader's access to ammunition. Every shell was within arm's reach. There was no wasted motion. The turret floor's rotation platform ensured that the loader's relative position to the racks never changed. It was a lesson the British later incorporated into post-war designs like the Centurion Mark III, which adopted a similar circular ammunition arrangement to reduce loader fatigue and improve rhythm. The Soviets also learned. Examination of captured Panthers at Kubinka in 1946 revealed a deep respect for the weapon's internal organization. Soviet engineers noted that crew communication and loading rhythm were integral to German tank doctrine, something largely absent from their own mass-produced designs. This realization led to modest ergonomic improvements in the T-54, which featured better shell access and turret rotation assist mechanisms, influenced indirectly by German experience. Yet for all its mechanical brilliance, the Panther's perfection was ultimately a symbol of the war's contradictions. The very qualities that made it formidable, precision, complexity, dependence on elite training, were unsustainable under the pressures of total war. Germany could not produce enough trained loaders, maintain enough tanks, or supply enough spare parts to keep the rhythm alive. What had begun as a triumph of engineering became a monument to overspecialization. Still, in isolated moments, the machine's potential shone with terrifying clarity. Combat records from late 1944 continued to show individual Panthers achieving improbable success, outnumbered crews holding off Soviet formations, gunners and loaders maintaining rapid fire despite overwhelming odds. One after-action report from Panzerlehr Division, dated November 1944, described a Panther that destroyed 4 T-34s/85s in under 90 seconds. The unit commander attributed the result not to superior firepower, but to seamless internal rhythm between gunner and loader. It was the same phenomenon witnessed earlier on the Eastern Front, a synchronization so complete that it blurred the line between man and machine. After the war, surviving engineers from MAN and Daimler-Benz participated in Allied interviews. They spoke of how their designs had aimed for mechanical perfection rather than production simplicity. They admitted that each modification, whether a new gear ratio, a breech timing cam, or an ammunition rack angle, had been intended to save seconds. One engineer reportedly said, "We believed that precision could win the war. We forgot that precision requires time, and time was what we no longer had." If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more World War II stories.